I want to talk to you about something quiet, not flashy, it's not dramatic, but it's incredibly expensive and costly to you. Over the years, I've seen this again and again in classrooms, in families, in meetings. Capable adults who are genuinely trying. They work hard, they care, and they're legitimately good people. And yet, they're living below what they know is possible for them. Not because they lack discipline, not because they aren't motivated, and not because they don't have the ability, but because they're living within a limit they quietly accepted a long time ago. And most people never realize it's happening. Once you see that, though, everything else starts to make sense to you. Most people think their struggle is about effort. They tell themselves, I just need to try harder, I need to be more disciplined, and I just need to boost my confidence. But the real issue is something much different. Most people are living inside limits they quietly accepted a long time ago, limits that were never actually theirs. At some point, something happened. A meaning got attached to this. And once the limit became familiar, it stopped feeling optional, and it just felt like a truth about yourself. At some point in your life, you had some experiences, some negative experiences. Maybe you had some struggles. You failed at something. You were embarrassed, or you didn't get the support that you needed. You got a label put on you. And then there's a whole bunch of labels that people get. You were compared to someone else and you didn't feel very good about it. And your mind did what it always does. It took that experience and it gave it meaning. And you created an interpretation about that experience. And once the meaning sticks, it quietly becomes a rule book that you live your life by. You didn't necessarily hit a ceiling and you didn't necessarily hit a limit. What happened is you drew a conclusion, and from that conclusion you gave it meaning. And then you attached it to your identity. And it became who you just think you are. You didn't question it anymore. You just accepted it as who you are. I've been a teacher for over 30 years, and I've worked with a lot of people, teenagers and adults. And one thing has become very clear to me. People don't usually fail because of an ability or a lack of an ability. They stall out or plateau because they interpret something as a fact instead of what it really is. It's just an opinion. But they don't view it as not an opinion, they view it as a fact. It's not a theory. And what they do is they think this is so true. This is just who I am. It's just like the sun comes up. That's just a fact about themselves. And once that happens, they live with that conclusion as a permanent part of who they are. It becomes their identity. They just latch onto it, they believe it, and they become certain about their limitations. They're more certain about their limitations and what they can't do, and then they're deeply uncertain about the possibilities, about what they could do, what's open to them. So they become very certain about their limitations. It will be things like, I'm not good at school, I can never be a leader, I'm bad with money, that's just not the way I am. And what happens is when you look at how they feel about uncertainty, about what could be possible for them, they say things like, I could never do that. I've made peace with my place or my lot in life. And I don't want to get my hopes up. And when I hear things like, I don't want to get my hopes up, it really gets me riled up, because what I know is happening is you're shrinking. You're aiming for your limitations. If you're not aiming for your hopes, you're aiming for your limitations. And versus what you could be doing is aiming for your possibilities. One shrinks you and the other one expands you. And it all started, usually for most people, when they wanted to protect themselves against another disappointment, another hurt, another pain. And they look at hope as that's going to lead to more pain, more disappointment, more setbacks. And what that does, again, like I said, is it shrinks you and you end up settling and you become a lesser version than you could. One thing that I really want you to consider is this thought right here. Uncertainty about what's possible might sound like maturity until you realize it's quietly deciding your future. What once protected you can quietly start confining you. And when a belief solidifies into an identity, you don't have to even try anymore. Why would you? If you know you can't do something, if you know you're incapable, if you know that's beyond what is possible for you, you don't even try because you don't want to associate with the pain, with the disappointments, with the setbacks. But here's what so many people miss. Limits don't usually come from a lack of talent. They come from old interpretations that were never revisited and quietly become rules. I've seen people in extremely tough situations turn it around. I taught GED classes in a federal prison for 8 years to incarcerated inmates, incarcerated adult men. And many of them were convinced that they were dumb. I would hear things like, I'm stupid, I've never been good at school, this is just the way I am. And they thought that school wasn't for them. And yet, once they shifted their interpretation of the past, of themselves, they started to see that things were possible. They could get their GED. They could move beyond that. And I had 30 to 35 guys each year graduate and get their GED. Now, some of them went on to take college classes, and they did things that was not even possible for the old version of themselves. And they revised their conclusion. They made a new interpretation. And they challenged their long-held assumptions. Now, if men in prison at some of the lowest points in their lives can change their interpretation of themselves, can change how they see, and then that changes how they act, how they respond, then it's possible for you to do the same thing. Most limits are not effort problems, they're interpretation problems. And here's the great news. Conclusions can be revisited and they can be revised. Here's a question that I like to have people ask, and you can ask it yourself if you feel like you're stuck and you want to get unstuck. What if this isn't a limit, but an outdated conclusion? And when you think about that, let it rest, let it simmer, and see, is there things in here that I need to upgrade? We do that with our phones, we do that with our computers. Why don't we do that with our identity and what we believe about ourselves? Now, this is not to be like, how do I fix myself? That's not what I'm getting at. Or what's wrong with me? Again, that's not what I'm looking for. Or why can't I just push through this? Why can't I just grind it out or get it done? That's not the direction I want you to look at this. Rather, I want it to be is what I believe about myself, is it true? Or is this something that's simply just familiar to me and I'm just repeating the patterns because it's comfortable, it's familiar, it's what I know about myself. So this isn't to judge yourself, it's not to fight yourself, it's just to see where you're at. And are you open to seeing about, can I revisit some of these interpretations I've made about myself? What you might notice is something that you say, I'm always, or this is the way I am, such as, I'm a poor reader. That's something I used to believe about myself, but I don't believe that anymore. Also, you might say, like, I'm shy. Is that really, really true? I don't have confidence. I don't handle pressure well. I'm bad at relationships. And you might even have a track record to prove that, prove that belief. But is it really, really true? Or is that just things you've learned that can be changed? Also, I hear a lot of people say stuff like, I'm not good with money. And so they've developed this whole thing about, I'm not good with money. Most "that's just the way I am" statements didn't come from deep self-knowledge. They came from moments when someone stopped questioning a conclusion. Notice places in your life where you say, "that's just the way I am." Then ask yourself, when did I decide that? Think about where you were at that time, what beliefs took root, and what happened. Because what were things that you didn't understand about yourself yet, but still somehow you came to these conclusions. Then ask yourself, am I open to revisiting this and exploring what else it could mean? Growth doesn't come from forcing yourself forward. Growth comes from removing what never belonged to you in the first place. Don't confuse an old story with a permanent truth. You're allowed to update your conclusions. If you'd like to explore this topic more, let's connect. Send me an email at brian@infinityshiftssystem.com because there's more possible for you than you might have been led to believe.